All right, welcome one, welcome all to the Scorched Earth Political Podcast. I am your host, John. If you could kindly hit that like and subscribe button, it means a lot to us. Feel free to drop a comment about anything I talk about. If you want to sound smart, agree with me. If you don't, disagree. I respond to all the comments and I appreciate them all. And if there's anything you want to talk about in a future podcast, feel free to drop it in the comment section and we will do our best to accommodate. Let's get to it. Let's burn it all to the effing ground. And what a week we have had. Literally 1 week ago, Donald Trump was still blocking the release of the Epstein files. And then the four Congress people on the Republican side would not capitulate to his demands to take their name off the disclosure. And they needed 218th. That actually became a reality when the Congresswoman from Arizona was finally sworn in by Mike Johnson after 6 weeks. And Sunday night, we had the huge reversal. Donald Trump says, go ahead and release the files. All right. If you're in the same boat with me, you think there's something up his sleeve. I see in the podcast and legacy media that everybody is saying, well, you know, he knew this is a big defeat. I just don't take it as that. I don't trust it as that. What has he done in his political career that indicates or even leads us to believe he will do the right thing? He will do what he says he is going to do. You know, the only thing that he actually follows through is when he does morally corruptible, morally indefensible things like, I'm going to round up the immigrants. I'm going to install myself as king. You know, things like that, he has no problem following through because it builds him up. Anything that has to do with democracy, it has to do with our rights, he is adamantly opposed to. Make no equivocation about that. He can bring up the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers as his personal militia. You know, it is all about him. He is in the Epstein files. There is not anybody with a sane mind who doesn't think he is in those files. But on Sunday night at 9:15 Eastern Time, he did an about face like John Travolta on the dance floor, did the 180, the pirouette, and said, go ahead. And then we saw things that we have not seen in the political spectrum in forever. 427 to 1. Was the vote in the House to release the files. And then Mike Johnson, the feckless Mike Johnson, who literally, first of all, we need to get his Grindr account exposed. Number two, he is the most incompetent Speaker of the House I have ever seen. I thought Kevin McCarthy was a loser. This guy takes it down a notch. He said, well, we're pushing it over to the Senate. They're going to make some revisions and then it's going to come back. Let me tell you something. The Senate didn't even take the time to look at it. They said, yeah, fine. We're passing it unanimously. I'm not even sure there was a vote. They just said, yeah, the chamber passes it unanimously, which in my lifetime on things that were big, the only things I can think of that had this kind of overwhelming appeal, backing, was when we decided we were going to go into Afghanistan and Iraq after the horrible tragedy of 9/11. And literally, I believe the Senate vote was 95 to 5. The House was overwhelmingly. It was, I believe, way into the 300s. And nobody wanted to be on the other side of it politically. I mean, Budweiser was running commercials about, you know, how they were embracing the 9/11 victims and things like that. The fever in this country for revenge was so great that nobody stood in the way. And in the silver lining, that is absolutely how Barack Obama, the greatest president in our lifetime, was elected, because he voted against going. But that's another thing for another podcast. We're not going to deal with that now. literally to get 427 to 1. Like I said yesterday, and I stand by it, if you put a bill on the floor and said, is water wet, you would not get that kind of response. You would not. And so the Senate said, keep on moving. Donald Trump, Wednesday night, signed the bill to have the release of the Epstein files. Okay? He is now directing in his social media post, we're going to get to that in a second, his Attorney General, Pam Bondi, to release all the files. Now, we've talked previously that is one of the ways they're going to try and pivot out of it, saying going with Donald Trump and Pam Bondi's agreement last week to investigate all the Democrats in the files. Is that going to preclude releasing files because those people are under investigation, which they don't really care about that. It's just a smokescreen to make sure they don't release anything that Donald Trump's involved with. You know, this guy saw Bill Clinton doing X, Y, and Z, and he saw Donald Trump. Well, can't release that. You know, I mean, that's the interesting part. And Pam Bondi, and let's go down the rabbit hole here for a second, because this is scorched earth. Pam Bondi, we had Jeffrey Epstein get arrested in 2009, convicted, got the sweetheart deal by Ray Acosta, the Miami Attorney General, District Attorney, excuse me. Gave him the sweetheart deal. Basically, hey, Jeffrey, just go home and molest the girls there. We don't want you traveling around the United States. And that deal existed for, I believe, 3 years. And during that time, this is going to be a little trivia question. This is on the final exam. From 2011 to 2019, who do you think was the Attorney General of Florida? Damn you, you are good. You are good. I could hear you saying Pam Bondi. And you were absolutely correct. So Pam Bondi was the Attorney General when Jeffrey Epstein was down there in Palm Beach, wreaking havoc, raping, sexually assaulting, being the repulsive pedophile he is. She was the Attorney General at that time. Didn't do a thing. Didn't do an effing thing. The charges came down from the feds when Jeffrey Epstein finally got arrested on July 6th of 2019. We're also going to get to a couple of little Donald Trump lies. Also, because this is the difference between the Republicans and the Democrats. There's many, besides that we have a heart and soul, is we don't care. We're not going to protect Democrats if they did some nefarious stuff. You don't see anybody out there in the political environment, especially on the Democratic liberal side, saying, oh no, we got to hide for Bill Clinton. Hey, if he did shady stuff, he needs to pay for that. He needs to be charged. He needs to see his day in court with due process. We also have Larry Summers. And I'll be honest, as a political and economic entity, I've always admired Larry Summers. I thought he was brilliant as Treasury Secretary under Bill Clinton. He was I believe, the head of the Economic Council for Barack Obama. And he has some very, very brilliant ideas about how to spur economic development in the country. And for all the MAGAs out there, let's not forget the economy does better under Democrats. Bill Clinton had one of the most robust economies ever. We gave it to George Bush and he did everything. He literally took the Republican playbook and busted the piggy bank, busted the economy. Then we had to have the great Barack Obama come in and fix it. The dude was swimming upstream each and every day, and he still accomplished it because he's a hell of a man and he's a hell of a politician. Then we get Donald Trump, and because of his inept handling of COVID, we literally almost put the world into a depression. If it wasn't for the great Nancy Pelosi spearheading that bill through Congress and the Senate, she did it to save the economy so we did not go into economic apocalypse. Donald Trump had nothing to do with that. He just signed the final thing. But literally, the GDP went down an insane amount. I mean, on levels that were very, very equal to what happened in the Great Depression in the midst of it. And because of that infusion of cash that was in the bill, that was led by the great Nancy Pelosi, we were able to avert economic failure in this country. Now, as a side of that, we did have inflation that started to perk up at the end of 2021 and 2022. Joe Biden got blamed for that. There was nothing he could do. It's funny. Everybody sits here and says, well, things went up. Yes. And he also issued stimulus checks. Was that the end all be all? No. But he is the one who spearheaded. People forget he gave 2 stimulus checks to the American people. And look, we forget about everything that was in the past, but I am telling you, first of all, they led to inflation because inflation, it gets caused, without getting into some macroeconomics lecture, that it's caused when you put money into the system, but there is no productivity that is derived from it. Excuse my terrible language. So basically what happens is there is no inflation. You go to work, you get paid, you take that money, you put it into the economy. You are doing a benefit for the economy. You're receiving economic money, and then you're putting it back into the economy. When COVID came, people got money, spent it, but there was no economic activity. It is truly a recipe for inflation. And the great Joe Biden actually was bringing it down in his last 18 months. Unfortunately, it was too little too late. And if you look at the economic numbers, the inflation numbers, like all the MAGAs like to, his inflation was 3.9%. Yeah, it was. But if you look at the next country, I believe it was France, it was over 6.5. Japan had 8. Joe Biden, obviously, he lost the election because of that. Let's call it what it is. Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, whatever. But they were dealt a hand that was almost impossible to deal with. And now we are seeing Donald Trump crater the economy that Joe Biden was actually had humming. It takes literally a year to get the economy. Well, Donald Trump is amazing because literally in 6 months, he has destroyed it with tariffs. And let me tell you something nobody else is going to tell you in the political environment. I'm going to give you something. Joe Biden, when inflation was going up, he wasn't really the public guy, right? And he sat back and he's like, well, let's just see how this all works. And he went with the Fed and he tried to bring it down. Eventually he got it there, but unfortunately it was too little too late. The problem Trump is going to have, and this is going to be something nobody can get away with and nobody else is talking about. That's why you come to scorched earth, is because as the economy craters, as affordability becomes an issue, as the price of goods becomes an issue, the cost of living becomes an issue, the problem he has, and he is too effing stupid to realize this, is we immediately are going to blame the tariffs. The tariffs have become, now, I think 100% his economic problems are all because of his economic tariffs. But let's live in some bubble. Let's live in some world. I am not Justin Wolfers. I am not Paul Krugman. My economic knowledge is a 7 on a scale of 1 to 10, right? They're 10s. But here's the thing, what nobody is talking about. If you as an individual feel the weight of economic problems or affordability or prices of goods, you are going to look over and go, it's the tariffs, whether or not it is. That is what Trump didn't understand. By putting the tariffs in, he gave us all something branded that we could blame. And it is all Trump. He wanted to be the president of tariffs. Good luck, buddy, and Godspeed, because you are. And when people have a problem with buying a house, with buying groceries, with paying rent, with getting gas, they are going to blame tariffs. Now, I think 99% it is because of the tariffs. But let's just say in another world, it isn't the tariffs. It doesn't matter. The messaging is already there. The branding is already there. The tariffs are going to be the boogeyman he is not going to get away from. Look, when you go to the store and your loaf of bread that was $2 is now $3.50, you don't care if there's $50 billion in some tariff fund in some Treasury Department warehouse. You don't care. Oh yeah, we're going to get $2,000 checks next year. Let me start holding my breath. Yeah, right? Please don't do that. I need you as subscribers. But wow, how did we even get to that? Okay, hey, this is a free-flowing podcast, okay? Love y'all. Love y'all. But let's get back to the real issue. How the Democrats are not going to deflect like Trump does. Larry Summers, who was the head of Harvard for, I believe, 6 years in the early 2000s, he is deeply involved with Epstein in the files. I don't know what his association is with the girls, but obviously it's very bad. He obviously is an idiot. He made a release this morning, this is Wednesday night, that I am very sorry for my involvement with Jeffrey. It was a very bad thing of judgment. I'm paraphrasing. And then he says, but I'm still going to continue to teach. Oh, Harvard couldn't stop that quick enough. Sorry, you're not teaching. And then they launched an investigation to all the people at Harvard who were linked to Epstein in the files. My question is, what took you so effing long? Really? Harvard? I mean, I love Harvard. I do love the liberal mandate and the progressive ideas that come out of colleges, but Jesus, man, really? This guy should have been canned, put on the sidelines years ago. Years ago. Whatever. But let's talk about Trump now signing the bill. Okay? Of course, he's telling the lady who is the AG of Florida, where Jeffrey Epstein was residing, between there and Manhattan, from 2011 to 2019. So Donald Trump in his post, this is cute. He says, Jeffrey Epstein, who was charged by the Trump Justice Department in 2019, not the Democrats. First of all, the Democrats couldn't charge him because they did not have the presidency. Number two, what took you 3 years? Hello? Hello? Yeah, exactly. Then he continues. He was a lifelong Democrat. He donated thousands of dollars to Democratic politicians. Of course, you know who also did in the early 2000s? Donald Trump. Oops. He was deeply associated with many well-known Democratic figures. Yeah, Donald Trump. When Donald Trump was hanging out with Jeffrey Epstein in the late 90s, middle to late 90s, he was listed as a Democrat. Ooh. Ooh. How did that all work? Then he continues. Perhaps the truth about these Democrats and their associations with Jeffrey Epstein will be revealed because I have just signed the bill to release the Epstein files. Question, Mr. President, why didn't you do that on January 20th? You know, when you had that sweeping day, when we had the photo op where you signed 1 million different things? You know, to eliminate the Department of Education, to get rid of FEMA, to let Doge go. Why didn't you sign it that day? Hey, instead of doing the pirouette last Sunday, why didn't you just release them? Oops. Not clear. Now, the bill is known as the Epstein Files Transparency Act. It was passed by the House on Tuesday. We all know that. I am going to tell you right now, they have a way out. They're going to redact them. They're going to redact them so much, it's going to look like a black piece of paper, right? Like their souls, black and dark. And there is no way I am believing They are going to release. Now, supposedly, when the feds raided Jeffrey Epstein's Manhattan mansion, there was thousands of videotapes. One of the things that Jeffrey Epstein seemed to do was also videotape these prominent people for, wait for it, blackmail. Ooh. Then, of course, Jeffrey, some reason, somehow, committed suicide. I did see an interview with his brother on CNN, and he said, they've never done an investigation to see if he really killed himself. Of course he didn't kill himself. They killed him. They killed him. Because if he went out, Donald Trump's presidency or his potential 1 year later to get reelected was going to be a no-go. Funny, and I'm not really the conspiracy guy. I leave that to all the MAGAs. But Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide? Huh. And then Virginia Griffey? She committed suicide? Wow, that's weird. Two of the leading witnesses in the case of Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide. Huh. Wow. That's some powerful stuff. Yeah. Right. All right. We're going to end up with something here. Donald Trump's approval ratings this week hit a new low for the second term and for both of his presidencies as the population, the citizenry of this nation is worried about the way he is leading our economic future. Now, this is a Fox News poll. They polled 1,000 random right, left, moderate voters. Now, I am not a fan of Fox, but I will tell you two things that Fox does very well. Stay with me here for a second. One thing they do amazingly, their political pollsters are very good at gauging elections. Now, look, everybody can be wrong. There's that lady in Iowa who I think hit 16 of the last 17 elections. And last year she missed it. And she said Kamala's leading in Iowa. And it turned out not to be true. And then, of course, after the election, Donald Trump said he's going to sue her because she had a false poll. Well, polls are polls for a reason. They are anticipating, they're trying to take the political climate of how the voters will do when they get into the ballot box. And Fox is very, very good. I don't know what they do, but their polls typically seem accurate. Their polling is brilliant on a lot of levels. If you remember, and I'm sure you do, back in the 2020 election, they were the first major media outlet to call Arizona for Joe Biden. And they were absolutely right. They were literally 6 hours ahead of everybody else. Now, they do polling all the time. I'm not saying it's all accurate, but it seems like it's very, very good. I would say them and CNN seem to be the very best. And, CBS is good too. But the thing is, it doesn't mean Fox News always uses their polls, right? They pick and choose. But this one came out, and it finds that his approval rating is at 41% among registered voters. Now, it's down from 46% in early September. That's a 5-point drop in 2 months. Nearly half, 46%, say they've been personally hurt by Trump's economic policies, with just 15% saying those policies have helped them. So 46% of the people polled said Donald Trump and his economic direction is harming them each and every day. Only 15% happened to say it was helping them. Of course, those 15% are all part of the cabal that is the Trump cabinet, all the billionaires. I guess somehow they got 15% of the respondents to be worth over $500 million. Sorry, I didn't qualify. The interesting thing is, which I was really amazed, and 60% of the people in the poll said the Democrats have better ideas for the economy. That is powerful stuff going into an election year of 2026. I was stunned by that. I'm going to tell you what's coming. I'm going to go out there. Everybody talks about Trump running for a third term. I pray he does. I pray. I am getting on my hands and knees because trust me, you see this number at 41%. 40% of this country identifies as Republican. And 75% of those are MAGA. So if we're at 40%, 30% of this country identifies as MAGA. He's only at 41%. So out of the other 70%, he only got 11 points of that. Wow. Things are going sideways and they're going damn quick. Trust me, if he keeps going, and he will, the Supreme Court is going to probably revoke his use of tariffs. He's going to find another way around it. We know. I don't think there's anybody out there in the political environment or who follows politics who thinks he's going to obey anything the Supreme Court tells him. He's just going to find a little pivot, and then he's going to go back to court. And 6 months later, they're going to smash him in the face, and he's going to go, okay, I'm just going to do this. It's going to be what it is. But literally, a year from now, you are going to see a man who is so unpopular with the electorate, Republicans are going to start peeling away from him like he is literally Jeffrey Epstein at the party. They like him now. A year from now, no. And we are literally going to see the biggest wave. And then he's going to be a lame duck. And I'm going to tell you what's coming then. People are starting to stand up to him. And J.D. Vance, if you notice something about him, he tries to do I love the right, I want to be the leader of MAGA. MAGA is going to be destroyed 12 months from now. It's going to be done. It is going to be the Tea Party to part 2. Donald Trump is going to be viewed as ineffective, feckless, and nothing. He is not going to be the figurehead. He's not going to hand the mantle because nobody's going to want to take the mantle. It's going to be radioactive. We are heading into a recession. I hate saying that. If we're not already there. All the economic numbers seem to indicate we are. I mean, just look at yourself. Do you really think your dollar is going as far under Donald Trump as it did before he came into office? No. You thought you had it bad with Joe Biden? Joe Biden was bringing things around, but there was pain. I'm not going to argue that. But boy, Donald Trump is doing it self-inflicted. It is not other forces outside of his control. He controls the narrative, and he is literally destroying. I don't know if he is a Manchurian candidate. I don't know if he is a spy sent by Putin to destroy the United States economy, but damn, he is doing it. And he is doing it at an amazing rate and incredibly effectively. He's an idiot, and he's an idiot running the store, and he's the guy who ran it into the ground. All the advantages he had as president coming in, great relationships with all these other countries, then he pisses them off by raising the tariffs arbitrarily. Just all the dumb stuff he does each and every day. And look, I'm a Democrat, I own it, and I understand the partisan divide here. You immediately got to hate stuff he does. Look, in the first term, I did think he did some really good things about standing up to China. I did think that. I do think his legacy, when it's all over, will be how many people died because of his inept handling of COVID. And then the second term is going to be how Trump's tariffs, destroyed the United States economy. Just what it is. All right, that's it for today. If you could, I'd really appreciate it if you hit that like and subscribe button. Tell me what you think about Trump and his tariffs. And we'll see you soon. Hey, drop a comment too. Don't be a stranger. All right, we'll see you soon on the Scorched Earth Political Podcast.